I'll hand you on to Charles Goodier, Head of Trade, Advanced Manufacturing and Supply Chain, who will be talking to you about the actual tender process and what you should look out for.
All right, thanks Mandy. Good morning everyone. My name is Charles Goodier. I'm Head of Trade for Advanced Engineering, Manufacturing and Supply Chain based in our Manchester office. Prior to joining Invest Northern Ireland, I was involved in manufacturing and engineering for about 30 odd years, and 20 years of that in sales and international sales. So most of what I'm going to talk about is based on my own personal experience with public and indeed private tendering processes. It's going to move on. There we go. Yes. So this slide obviously highlights being in the right place at the right time. You won't really know if you're in the right place at the right time unless you start engaging with some of these public tenders. The good news is that many of these organisations are seeking out and working with SMEs and not just the big boys. They see SMEs as having the most innovation and disruptive technologies and services that they're looking for. So when you sign up on a framework, you may receive a request for information, a pre-qualification, or even a full-blown tender. In terms of the information that's required, all of these processes can be quite involved. So realistically, you need to check that you're going for the right tenders, i.e. check if you can achieve the requirements, and aim for tenders you can win realistically. And that's probably a tender that you can comply with more than 80% of the requirement. I think the most important thing is to put a mini project plan around completing the actual tender in the timescales that you've been allocated. This might be months, it might be weeks. Another thing is allocating it to a senior manager. Don't just leave it to the sales department. There's lots of conflicting priorities. If your business is lean and efficient, and it goes without saying that you'll need extra resource to take on the workload, and someone's got to decide on who gets what. And of course, on top of that, make sure everyone understands the importance of the critical timelines to actually complete the tender or bid on time. Research, as we said, this may be part of pre-market engagement and probably needs to be ahead of the game, but using that research to understand the target organisation, what business it's in, who are its competitors, and most importantly of all, what are their competitors' weaknesses, because you're going to be there to provide a solution. And to that extent, you need to understand what your own unique selling points are, your own advantages, and what makes you stand out in the market. And just to dwell a bit on cost and value, in your everyday sales, your own customers may understand the intrinsic value of your product, generally out of experience. The flip side of that is that the target organisations that you're after may also have incumbent suppliers for the products and services. And of course, it's not strictly legitimate as a public tender to take this into consideration. But that said, authorities can be risk averse, and especially when they've got existing infrastructure, they've got existing support, they've got existing parts. So staying on this point briefly, in a way, you've also got to be prepared to downgrade your product. Your product may be made from expensive materials, stainless steel, aluminium, even carbon fibre. But the existing product, or more importantly, the specification, may only specify something like mild steel. So you either have to back up your more expensive product with a value proposition, such as lifetime or corrosion resistance, or think about downgrading your product to get it in on price and upsell options later on. So as I've said before, don't ignore pre-market engagement. You have to engage with these people. They will talk to you. They do want to talk to you, and it's important to understand that before you actually pick up a tender. Things like budget, obviously, how much do they expect to spend over the next year, over the next 5 years? Another thing maybe that the tender may not be directly applicable to you, but an awareness for who may be your customer. And I guess what I'm trying to say there is a lot, as I said before, they were trying to engage with SMEs, but there will be a lot of big contracts dealing with tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, and those tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers may be your customers. So you need to be clever about what's being tendered for and how you engage with those tier 2 suppliers. Another point is those assessing the tender submission may not be experts. Most of the time they would just use a scoring system. With a scoring system, how it's scored and how it's weighted, of course, is unknown. And again, price may have a higher weighting within the tender than the actual benefits, so you've got to be aware of that. Most importantly, as you plan, is to do a draft and review it with your team. And then at the end of the process is proofread it to make sure it's correct, and make a checklist to make sure that you've got everything together that you need for this tender. And some of the considerations, so production capacity obviously is how long do you have to bookmark or hold future capacity for, specifically with the framework, lots may be called off over a period of a year or 2 years. Is this additional capacity? Is it going to be substitutional capacity? Are your suppliers on board? Can they help with delivery and cost, especially if it's incremental business? You might be able to get better costs from your suppliers. Engineering and design, other resource like purchasing. Some of these tenders will hoover up those resources. Again, the contract documents can be quite involved, and specifically legally, you may get tens of pages of terms and conditions that you may not understand. Things to look out for are liquidated damages, specifically more than often relating to delivery or even the performance of the product or service itself and its availability. So it's important, I think, to have a project plan around the contract itself, highlighting the key decision points and especially highlighting the customer's commitment. And this is especially important to say, I need a specification by X so I can have my proper lead times to get it in production on time and we can deliver on time. Financial considerations, obviously, cash flow is probably the most important, but also considering the liquidated damages and things as above. Like I said, in terms of caps and risk, you want to try and cap risk to at least the value of the contract, hopefully less, of course. You need to consider product support, how you're going to support the product, especially from Northern Ireland. Do you need someone in territory to support the product? And that goes hand in hand with warranty, warranty period. How long is the warranty? Is it 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? And that then goes on to things like part supply, where some companies may ask that the product is supported for at least 15 years with parts. And you need to ensure that you can either make those parts available or provide substitutional parts. And in terms of the documentation, of course, goes without saying, it's very important to read the documentation carefully, identify the instructions. How do they want the information? Is it all electronic? Will they want hard copy? Will they want 10 copies of hard copy and electronic? Look for strong words within the tendering. Shall, will, must do, must provide, that kind of thing. Obviously, make sure you do what they ask. Have they asked for any additional information that you need to take some time to go and find? The most important thing here is try not to say no. Always say compliance with variation. It's not always a negative thing. Sometimes, as we said, your product may be better and you have to outline that you haven't specifically met the specification, but your product is better because of X. And as Winston Churchill says, tact is the ability of someone to tell them to go to hell in such a way that they enjoy the trip. So some are e-tendering systems, as we said. So you need to understand what's involved in uploading documents. A lot of information may be required to be actually keyed in online, and it can be quite frustrating with formatting and putting pretty pictures in and things like that. And this takes time and really needs to be planned for. So while processing, again, comply with what is being asked, provide all the information that has been asked for. You may be just rejected for not supplying one critical piece of information. Make sure your references are relevant. Make sure, of course, they'll give you good references, and of course, they're giving you permission to use them as a reference. Don't write things like answer per question 8 above. As we said, the document may end up being split up amongst various departments to work on, and they could score you 0 if they don't see an answer in the box. Ensure consistency in grammar and in all your responses. Try resisting and copying and pasting from older tenders, and certainly don't refer to previous submissions. And at some point, you may be allowed to ask sensible clarification questions, usually online. These questions will be published to everyone who is actually involved in the tender, and the answers will as well. And again, most importantly, allow for gremlins at the point of submission. Something will always go wrong at the last minute. I think in the background and at all times, if you are ongoing going to be tendering within the frameworks process, keep your company organization chart up to date. Keep your financial accounts and statements up to date. Company policies, accreditation documents, things like quality manuals. Insurance, obviously, it's important and part of the contract to understand what your limits are, specifically to public liability and any professional liabilities. Any reference you have, keep your staff biographies up to date, and your website. And your website most of the time will be your calling cards, so that's very important to keep that up to date. Well scanned PDF documents for uploading, preferably originals, certainly not photocopies, and watch the file sizes on them. And keep backups of everything, because inevitably things will get lost. Any follow-up to the tender? Again, you'll probably be traveling to this side of the water, so make sure you're available and you can travel for briefings. There'll be a cost associated with that, of course. Make sure you've got the right people handling the clarifications. If you're going to do a presentation, stick to the timetable for the presentation, probably not what I'm doing here. Make sure those who are going to any interview understand the tender and indeed have the authority to discuss pricing or any technical discussion. So what not to do, of course, that is a deliberate spelling mistake. Poor spelling with poor grammar, obviously poor labeling of documents, digital files, make sure the digital file names make sense. Unclear documents, like I said, bad photocopies, anything like that. Sloppy mistakes, forgetting to answer key questions, leaving out key information, providing irrelevant references, or as we said, doing it all at the last minute. That may kill your bid. And one of the most heinous crimes is actually, most tenders will say there are to be no identifying marks on the outside of the package. Now, you know, we all want to use a courier to make sure it gets there on time, and we ensure that it arrives 9 o'clock the next day. But couriers may put your original address on the outside of the label. Now, if they see this may exclude you from the tender straight away, and all that hard work will go down the drain. So be very careful.